is Behind the Games from newoverlords.com, where we seek creators of all kinds to find out what's behind our favorite games. With your hosts, Jeff and Seema.
This is New Overlords Behind the Games podcast, and from our Midwest studio, I'm Jeff Ilimek.
And from our Northeast studio, I'm Seema.
Today we're joined by Jason Parks, founder and CEO of Rotu, an amazing game studio and media company. Jason, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Great to be here.
Glad to have you. Rotu, I'm really excited to talk about Rotu. It was one of those few studios when I was going to PAX West this year that I researched ahead of time because it caught my eye for a couple reasons. The main reason is part of my things that motivate me is emerging technology and virtual reality. I was really hoping to get my hands on and to see more game studios really stretching VR. And Rotu is definitely a company that's doing that. And we'll talk a lot about the hand tracking in particular. And then what sealed the deal for me is when I met you and AK when I went to PAX West, and I heard more about the art and the music and the themes and the innovation that you guys are building in on top of a really good VR hand tracking game. That really kind of made me excited and kind of made me want to learn more. So I know we talked a little bit at PAX West, and I'm glad we get to talk now, just so everybody kind of has the foundation for what I got excited about. Why don't we start it with you describing Aeolia a little bit, one of your latest VR games that's sort of a showcase for this, and then we'll get more into the studio and the background and things like that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, again, thank you for having me. We had a great time on the floor at PAX. It was great to get to know you. And to talk about what I showed you and everyone that was at PAX saw and a game that we've recently released called Aeolia. We're focusing on a 5 to 7 hour VR experience focused completely around hand tracking, right? Really pushing the boundaries of what you can do with hand tracking, specifically with locomotion systems. We wanted to create something that could be more than just, hey, you're at a table and there's a bunch of cool things to interact with, right? We wanted to be able to navigate across large terrains, ride mounts, and ultimately be able to get across miles and miles of gameplay. So we accomplished this in, I think, a very novel, interesting way. And we've also focused on incorporating a long existing story we call Rhythm of the Universe, this saga. It's our version of Star Wars, our version of a large major intellectual property, right? And in our world, we turn instruments, note names, everything that encompasses music and music theory. We turn that into lands, people, ecosystems, game mechanics, storyline arc, one giant world based around this idea of music mythology. And so we infused, what we were able to do and pushing the boundaries of hand tracking, along with the skills we learned from this game right here, Aeolia, which was released earlier last year. And we really created this long, fun, hand-first VR game.
Hand first. And I think that pushing the technology, getting into hand first, hand tracking, I think there will be a place for these still in the future.
Oh,
there's some games where this is fine, where the controllers are fine. And for the people that are listening, I'm holding up one of the Quest controllers. When you have a complicated game where you need a bunch of buttons and you're button clicking and you're pulling triggers, this is a natural interface. Okay, that's fine. But there's going to be more and more, I think, a need for VR and augmented reality to have a much more natural interface, a much more discoverable interface with just our hands. And it makes it much more accessible. I've done this a lot in augmented reality, and I'm glad to see it's expanding into virtual reality as well. I did work on the HoloLens, and in the HoloLens, you can't have anything in your hands when you're in your actual world, your actual environment, and needing to pick up real world objects, like maybe you're a doctor and you're operating. You can't have one of these controllers in your hand to do a thing. You need to reach out and be able to touch and grab objects in the air.
Yeah.
Doing that in VR then also is very natural. And then what you're able to do, and this is what you guys have started to do with Aeolia, is make the environment interactive in such a way that's discoverable and natural for someone. Instead of having a controller where you got to like point a thing to try to open a door, I can just reach out and grab a doorknob.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. So Aeolia does that with like you and I we're talking a bit about the keys just in the very beginning of the game. Here's a key. What are you going to do with the key? Well, there's a lock. I'm going to stick the key in the lock, and it's just very natural. And then you stick the key in the lock, and the box doesn't open. Well, what do you do next? What do you think you would do? And it's just very natural. You just turn the key.
Exactly. And then most people are like, oh man, they have a lot of, oh, I can't believe I didn't realize that moments in our game. Because we live in an intuitive world, and games should be the same.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, but the intuitive world, there's a concept called in experience design, and not just digital, but in all kind of experience design, industrial design, called affordances. An affordance is where a thing sticks out at you as a user that makes it seem like an interactable object. A doorknob on a door is an affordance. You could have this rectangle in the wall, and that gives you some clue that there's something there, but you would have no idea how to open it. Do I push on it? Do I bang on it? But if there's a doorknob there, it's very natural for a human to just reach out and grab that thing. So that opportunity to put those natural affordances in an experience just seemed really, really fun.
And to your earlier point, I would say that, and this might be a shock to a lot of gamers, most people don't know how to use a joystick or a controller for that matter.
Right.
Most people have never touched one in their lives, and VR is more and more not just a gaming tool, but there's just going to be a large amount of people, already are, who have never played a game in their life, but because they have a VR headset, they're looking to explore into this realm, and this is where they're actually starting to maybe play a game for the first time. So to your point, like that, that is where intuitive design and everything you just expressed becomes very valuable to them, because they're not going to learn what you're holding.
Right. These controllers do take learning. I mean, there's two thumbsticks on either side. So you're like waving the thing around while you're rotating your thumbs around on the thumbsticks. And then you have palm triggers, finger triggers, and multiple buttons. That's a lot.
I think we're all gamers, right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming, So like to us, it's like, wow, intuitive. I've been doing it before I could talk. But to someone who hasn't, oh man, it's scary. Try and hand a controller to someone who's never played a game before. They want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
I'm really excited when you talk about making things intuitive, because I think that is one of the, great frontiers of gaming right now that we're looking at. And I hope I'm not getting too far ahead, but you talked about something when we touched base last week about having that finger pinch interface instead of a pointing finger. And one of the things you said was like the pointing finger sometimes will cover up what you're trying to actually, I'll say, click on. And I know as a gamer, if I struggle with something like that, I think that's just me being clumsy, and then I'm kind of turned off to the whole experience. And I think the finger pinch idea is just genius, because you can see what you're doing and, keep on walking into that world.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, and that comes to, again, even intuitive design into the gestures that you can create and the limitations, and getting creative with the limitations of what hand tracking at this point in time can do. And so to elaborate our audience a little bit about what we were chatting about last week was in Aeolia, the way we navigate the world is through this pinch gesture, where if I'm pinching, it's almost like I've just triggered a joystick. And if I move forward, right, if I go slowly, I move slowly. If I move away from the original point in which I pinched, I go faster, right? So you're able to drive yourself in almost like a conducting pattern. If anybody's a musician out. And so one of the things we tried really early on, to your point, was like, hey, we tried pointing. Like, can I just go in the direction I point? That seems like it should work. But turns out, many angles of pointing you actually lose your finger. You can't see it. Your hand's in front of it, ultimately losing the confidence of hand tracking, and therefore giving you a horrible time. All of a sudden, you veer left, you veer right, you stop out of nowhere. So, even though our locomotion system isn't perfect, not a single one is yet. It is it's very confident in knowing the gesture that you're making when you want to actually do something. And then I'll even add to that, since we are talking about some of the advancements we made. Shout out to Michael Hogue, one of our lead tech director and magic of all things Unreal over at Rotu, who really created some incredible ways that create hand tracking to be more intuitive. For example, I grab a ledge, right? And normally in another VR game, if I look away, it's as if my hand never did anything, right? Like I would drop an item, I would drop the ledge, right? Because I no longer can see my hand, it's no longer there. Well, we've done this awesome little ability where we create a level of prediction. So if I'm holding a ledge and I look away, I'm probably still holding the ledge. So when you come back and you play through Aeolia, you'll learn and notice that you're actually interacting
Yeah.
and doing things without ever even losing it.
Okay, we're getting much deeper into the game than I meant to.
Yeah, let's
we'll get to, I want to introduce the studio and that kind of thing. But just to wrap up on that, I wondered about that because when you're riding the big beast, for example, you're holding the reins, and you gotta snap the reins and to speed up, and you can turn by turning the reins, but you can still look behind you.
Yes.
You can look around because there's a big sand god in the sky coming to kill you. And you do want to kind of look back and see how close he is on your tail. But when you look back, I wondered about that. I'm now no longer looking at my hands. But you're right. That's very clever, and that's a big innovation. Thinking about those kinds of things and designing that into the game, that's brilliant. And it makes a lot of sense. It makes it feel really natural.
And story wise, that giant storm you saw was Nagras More. It's akin to climate change. It is the evildoer of our game, and it is triggered and created by Salius Locrius, sort of this music theory superpower, mighty force that is using discord instead of harmony to change the world in the image he wants to see fit. And it's your job as a modus, as a music theory superpower master, to fight against this.
Okay. And now that gets into the lore and the music theory. Let's talk about the studio for a second and where that comes from and where you guys got started and where you got started. And because I think this will put things together for people really quickly on why this music, that the really epic world, epic universe that you guys have created all around music and music theory. So give us some of that background.
Oh, so Rotu Entertainment started with 90 musicians from 90 different countries coming together and writing a song of peace. We had citizens that were of countries that were at war with each other sitting at the same table writing music together. And back a long time ago, over 10 years ago, the video went viral. We then were able to sell out Symphony Hall, a large venue here in Boston. And we realized we have something powerful here. We're working with international musicians and artists, bringing them together, and the collaborative nature of that was something that we had never seen before. And we then started to create, working with and for nonprofits, music videos, documentaries, lots of immersive media events, and ultimately that led us to discovering virtual reality. And we realized that, this is the direction we want to go with our storytelling. This is the medium in which we want to tell our stories. Luckily, our team and our network had a lot of Unreal Engine talent, a lot of Unity talent, a lot of developers, and we really got to work and started creating our first game, Ionia, and haven't stopped since, and have released Aeolia, and we have plans for future games as well.
So the world that Ionia and Aeolia take place in was created before you even were thinking of games.
Oh, yeah. You can go on YouTube right now, type in Rhythm of the Universe, and you'll find characters from these games and other characters that are involved in this universe on stage performing live in front of 30,000 people in music videos. We had traveled to the Peruvian Amazon, filmed the illegal gold mining and deforestation happening there. Some of the elements of the story made it into that project as well.
Wow.
Interesting. I did not catch that part of it. And for the people that do watch the video, I'll put some video clips of that in right around now when we're talking. Yeah. That is pretty amazing. So a couple parts of that I want to dig into. You said the people that are now part of Rotu, your team, also are all music experts, right?
Yes.
So you guys all came from Berkeley, MIT Music. So you're bringing all of this deep talent to the table. And you just also happen to be technologists and virtual reality encoders and Unreal Engine and all of this kind of thing. Where are you finding these brilliant unicorns?
Right.
Well, it turns out that when you go to, when you get a degree in music, nowadays, it's very tech heavy, right? We're learning lots of music software and video software to edit for the music we make. And so most
Yeah.
musicians and most people going in, and also Berklee College of Music is widely known as the hub of tech of music tech, right? As much as it produces awesome, amazing musicians, it's producing everyone behind the scenes too, the producers, the technologists who are creating the advancements in AI generated music banks and things like that. So it wasn't
Yeah.
too
Okay.
hard and wasn't a stretch for us to go from Berklee College of Music students to understanding Unreal. I believe we started using Unreal originally to make some of the scenes that were projected behind us in
Hmm.
concerts. And we started to realize that, oh, here, we have something here and there's more to this than just making music or just doing videos. And it really was the fact that all of us were also gamers. When we were gamers personally, and then when we discovered virtual reality, we wanted to marry the two together, and it was clear that this was the direction we wanted. And this, by the way, this is before Facebook bought Oculus. This is, we took a bit of a risk. We rolled some dice on this one, and I'm so glad we did because when I put on that headset and I saw the whale go by in the blue, I just knew. Like, this has to be something in the future.
Yeah.
There's no way VR was going to dwindle and die. It was just too immersive, too incredible of an experience.
I think we're still in the very early stages. And I think there's still so much further that it can and will go.
Oh.
It's, I think, really a benefit that companies like Microsoft and now Sony and Facebook, through their investments, are really doubling down in that area because that's going to bring it forward. It still, I think, really needs another 5-10 years to really be everything that it can be. And I can't wait. Now, you
Absolutely.
and
I mean,
and all of us, we can deal with it right now and experience everything that it can bring to us. But as you said, things like the hand tracking, you're building within the limitations of the system today because I only have 2 small cameras on the front of my Oculus here, and it can only see what's straight ahead of it. It doesn't necessarily need to be limited like that in the future. We could go back to the satellite the satellite station with AI and cognitive services watching gestures from another angle and putting it together into a where it can still watch my hands when I turn my head and I look away. Those things can come, but they're only going to come through big investment, and we've got that big investment, which is great.
Absolutely. And then competitors coming in, as much as I love Meta and App Lab, Meta and Reality Labs, right? They have the best headset, hands down. The Quest 2 and what we're going to see in the near future, by design, by advancement, and what it's capable of doing, is the best headset out there, right? But then you have all these competitors coming out. ByteDance with Pico is something that we might want to keep our eye on, right? Not for the North American market yet, but something that very well could quickly become a competitor. And I know that there's a few other headsets on the horizon coming out in the next year that
Yeah.
are very exciting. And I am a believer in the standalone headset. I think we will have to get there. As much as I love this index right here, and I'm sure any VR fans, PC VR fans that are watching right now would the first thing they would say is that my Quest can never look as good as what that looks like, running on a good graphic card, which is true right now. But when it's standalone, it is what's going to be mostly adopted in the future,
Yeah.
and that's why we're focusing on it at Rotu here.
Right. And going further, it's just the headset, and we've taken the controllers away, and we're bringing just the headset in our hands. No wires, not connected to anything. The game is on Oculus. It's just right there. You get it off the store, you just start playing. That's very, very powerful. And I think that's the direction that the industry needs to continue to go. And we'll see what Apple brings to the table. We'll see what Magic Leap and HoloLens, where they become, and is there going to be a merge between these things in the future for us to be able to have a lot more of this kind of good stuff going on.
You just made me realize that I believe Aeolia might be one of the few, if not the only, full 7-hour, full-fledged game built for hand tracking where you could put on the headset, buy it with your hands, play it with your hands, put the headset down and never touch a controller. It might be one of the first.
It's a big step forward from that perspective, regardless, because even if it's not the only one out there, it's such the complete package with all of that layered into the music and the lore and the experience and the advances that you guys are putting into it as well. So I want to talk about a couple things still on the music production. So you came from music production, Rotu did. One thing I wanted to go back to and touch on was Unreal, using Unreal in the stage production, music production. I got really excited when I started seeing the behind the scenes production for The Mandalorian.
Yes.
Because they were using Unreal on the big immersive soundstage that would just, so they've lit up a giant soundstage. And if you haven't seen the behind the scenes, people should go and watch that. It's a giant soundstage and it's an LCD, basically a giant LCD panel as big as a warehouse wall. And they use Unreal and create the scene, the backdrop, so that when the actors go in and start acting, they're not standing in front of a green screen. They're standing on Tatooine, or they're standing in the environment, and they can look around, they can look out into the, watch the sunset on the horizon and be there. That's really immersive for the actors. And then they've created the tech to be able to, as they move the camera, the scene actually shifts because of the parallax, so that everything looks correctly. When I heard you guys were doing the same thing, I thought that was amazing and really an advanced use of this kind of tech. So, what did you do with it, and where do you see that sort of going? Just as an aside. For a minute or two.
Absolutely. I know we dived into it right at the last moment when we were speaking last, and I see it as Rotu's secret sauce. We spent so much time learning how to optimize for VR that we were able to really hone in and create skills that allowed us to make hyper realistic, beautiful environments run efficient, which is funny enough exactly what you need for a virtual art department who is providing services for virtual production, right? So for the fans listening, virtual production, as you had described, Jeff, is these, instead of using green screens, this giant LCD panel, and you're projecting an environment, an Unreal Engine environment, basically a slightly altered version of a game level, of a game environment. You project that on a screen, and actors are acting against that screen instead of a green screen. So sometimes it's used for just pre-visualization, just to be like, hey, maybe it's nice to see the environment instead of just always pretending like I know what planet I'm on or what environment I should be in. But it's also used in really creative, clever ways to have a final product recorded, like as you mentioned, Jeff, in The Mandalorian. So Rotu has been working on several projects. We have a bunch in the works. I can't really talk about most of them, but what I can say is that if you go to, and a shout out to Orbital Studios, we've been working with them for quite a while now. A fantastic virtual production studio with multiple locations. I think they started in LA, still are in LA as well. And if you go to orbitalvs.com, really most of the visuals you'll see on that website are all created by Rotu. And we have a lot of exciting projects coming up, which directly benefited from us learning how to create VR games.
Okay. I think that's pretty amazing. And I will look that up because I would love in the future for all my walls in my house to be replaced by LCD panels and be able to just project virtual environments all over the place that I maybe hand create myself. And that's where I'll live.
I'm a Trekkie, so I'm right there with you.
There we go. We'll be in new undiscovered worlds anytime we want. The other place that you guys are really doing a lot of innovation, as you said, is the integration of music and sound and the gestures then and the discovery of the hand tracking, but also stitching that together. So a few of the things that I know I was really interested to hear you talk about was one of the things you lose when you take the controller out of your hand is some of the benefits like haptic feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And if haptic feedback is a nice feature so that it's kind of needed on the controller because you've got that disconnect between I'm now clicking a button and that's my hand picking something up or grabbing it. Mm-hmm. The haptic feedback lets you know that, yeah, you've picked it up or grabbed it. You guys have started to do some twists on that using audio and sound design to trigger what's going on in the environment, to connect that to the player, to create an experience that meshes the VR, what I'm doing with my hands, and the sound design of what's going on. So why don't you talk about that for a second? Because I think that's brilliant.
Yes, absolutely. And this would be a shout out for Cesar Suarez and the rest of our audio team over at Rotu, focusing on creating, I guess you could call it like audio haptics, right? Where to your
Right.
point, you don't have you don't have that vibration. We're not able to control what the, what type of touch or the strength of that touch is in any way. But it's so incredible how the ear utilizes like the environment that you're seeing, right? So let's even talk about that key in the chest, right? Grabbing the key has a sound. The fact that I pick it up, and also in Aeolia, we have akin to Half-Life Alex an ability to do a far field grab. So I see an item, I lift my hand out, I look at it, and I use musical vibration to bring it to my, and that has a sound. Once I hold it, it has a sound, and then putting it into the lock creates the sound in which you would hear. And if you work hard on creating an environment where all audio detail is incorporated, you start to lose the need for so much haptic and so much just physical response on top of when you're wearing a good pair of headphones. And also Caesar did a great job of making this happen with just the built-in Oculus Quest 2 speakers, that you have vibration through lower and mid-ranged audio waves right there. So you actually can create a sensation of a physical sensation through the sound. And he did a great job of incorporating that through the game, and also
Interesting.
blending that with music, right? Where also having transitions, sort of like you have in a film, but ultimately being variable and ready to interact with your environment as well as the sound effects. Sort of when you put those two together, along with a very beautiful visual, we haven't had really that many comments of people being like, "Oh, like I can't, I don't know what to do because of hand, of no haptics, or really any mention of missing haptics." Like that's not generally been the issue with anybody with comments or feedback, and I think it's because the team did such a great job with that audio feedback.
I think it's a brilliant approach. The brain is really good at filling in the blanks and tricking you by taking other senses that you didn't realize you could make access and use of to replace the other senses that are missing. So you're missing the feeling of touch when you're picking up the key. But if you're always getting that consistent audio signal of here's what happens when you pick up an object, here's what happens when you insert an object in a place, and your brain will connect that and very quickly almost replace the sense of touch as you get immersed in that environment. Our brains are tricky that way.
I think oh, sorry, please.
No, I was saying, so I think that was an amazing innovation that I think a lot of game studios should now learn from and come to you and get your expertise, because this is, I think, an industry leading approach to trying to figure out how you're going to make touch only or hand only interfaces work.
Well, we do work with other studios, so if anybody's listening, please, we would love to share our expertise.
Yeah, which I think is another way that we're going to, as a community, as a gaming industry, move VR and AR and all of this forward. Is we all need to work together as well. And this is a great area, VR in particular, because it's so early. There's a lot that needs to be learned. There's not a standard user interface. There's not an X button in the upper right of the screen that works all the time in VR to know that this is how you close a window or open a window. Or you don't have that standard, Apple or Windows UI, just even for navigating the opening and closing of your game. And until you get sort of the experience, the user interface standards evolved for the industry, it's hard for players or newcomers to the ecosystem to hop from game to game or experience to experience, because they have to learn a new user interface every time.
Yeah.
So with you guys taking the lead in some of that replacement for haptics for touch, if that could become sort of like a standard layer and everybody could learn from that, the navigation is another tool where I think there needs to be convergence. If we can converge in some of these ways, then studios can focus on the game mechanics and the game experience, and have some of those user interface, those platform components hopefully worked out before long.
I completely agree. I want to see Aeolia be a grandparent of hand tracking, especially with locomotion. And I feel it's the same way that every game that gets made, either even the highest budget VR games, even the lowest budgets, they're all working towards solving something in the VR space, right? They have a benefit where some of the criticisms are that there isn't a standard and that some people have preference over one type of gameplay as opposed to another studios. But ultimately, when you play a lot of VR, especially as a developer, you start to see, hey, wow, like this particular game, I'm not happy with almost 90% of it, but this 10% they got right here is something better than I've seen in any other game. And that's almost true to every VR experience I've seen. And we just had Bone Labs release, right? And that's probably going to help standardize physics. And we have, obviously, existing games have already standardized a lot as to what we do, and you're absolutely right. And I think your timeline is good too. What you mentioned earlier in terms of the hardware, the same applies to the software. We got 5-10 years until we have these standards, until an Elden Ring in VR could be made, for example.
Yeah. There'll be more experiments and there'll be more things that are tried. And then the best of each of those, as you say, the best of each of those components are going to end up sort of merging and converging because
Mhm.
everyone will say, okay, well, that's really the right way to do it. And everybody, the reviews will come back for the people that do it the wrong way to say,
Mhm.
why don't you do it like X? Because that happens all the time everywhere.
Oh, it
You
does.
mentioned
Yeah.
Half-Life Alex and the gravity glove kind of concept. That was a fun innovation to experience from a user interface perspective and became really natural in Half-Life Alex. Okay, we'll grab that. We'll take that. We can do it with hand tracking as well. So we'll take that. The navigation gestures in Aeolia, I think are really unique. So I don't know if I bet there'll be a lot of people trying lots of different things there, and some will get it right and some will get it wrong. So we'll see where that evolves. The idea that in Aeolia, as you mentioned, and I picked up on this even before you mentioned it, when we talked last, of it almost like you're conducting an orchestra.
Mhm.
It fits with Aeolia really well. We'll have to see if it fits as well with other games. I'm I tend to be a fan of teleport movement in
Mhm.
VR games, just with what I'm comfortable with. I got really used to it though, and I think this is one of the things with VR. And as the headsets and the technology and the frame rates get better, it will become easier and easier to adapt to new ways of locomotion. I was I was taken aback when I couldn't do teleport locomotion in Aeolia, but I got used to it really quick. So again, it's more experimenting. It's seeing where we can lead the users. I think there's really a lot of innovation that's still to come, which is exciting.
And I think that's why, as a studio, as a team, as game developers, we really focused on having our saga here, Rhythm of the Universe saga, be dramatically different. Where Ionia is teleportation first, a smooth locomotion second. It was
Yep.
made for teleporting. It's made for super comfortable. Like someone who's never done VR before should play Ionia. Whereas with Aeolia, we realized that, hey, we were not happy with any of the teleport hand tracking solutions we were trying to go with, and we realized instead of trying to fit a square into a round hole, let's just focus on making the smooth locomotion that we're happy with as good as
Yeah. Okay.
possible.
All right.
So
That
that's
that
the
makes sense
direction
to
we
me.
went, and yeah. Mhm.
Teleport locomotion when you've got the thumbsticks tends to work really well. But you just triggered something for me there. With hand tracking alone, teleport locomotion does become clunky and difficult to manage. Where you're trying to like make that teleport go and how do you make it happen? It's really natural with a thumbstick. And if you're a gamer who's used to using dual thumbstick controllers, it becomes really natural. You're right. I don't know how well that would work. I'll have to. I haven't played Ionia. I've watched a bunch of videos on it. Now I gotta get in there and play the
Mhm.
teleport and see how that works in there because that would be a difference. Hmm.
And yeah, and it's really just it's a matter of preference. I've actually played a few hand tracking titles who did a teleport in a way that I thought was smart, and for teleporting it was a good job, but I just and my team, we just could not land on one that we were happy with. and we felt like, hey, for a game that we're focusing on it being for gamers and focusing on it being rather difficult, like you can fall 40 feet off a cliff in Aeolia. You cannot do that in Ionia, right? So for a game that that's focused on people who have played more VR, we're
Yeah.
most of our audience is going to be just fine with the smooth locomotion. Though updates are coming. One thing we're very proud of with Aeolia is that we're doing constant bi-weekly updates. We've already put out several that have fixed a lot of initial concerns and added new levels and added new quality to those levels. Giant graphic update as well. So we're going to keep iterating, and the Aeolia we have now will be much different than the one we have a year from now. So who knows if we can find a good solution? Maybe if a future headset, right, is now available and it allows us a better uh, uh, gesture for teleporting with hand tracking, we might do it.
Yeah. Have it. It could be an option in the future. Yeah, that's interesting. Something came to mind also when we're talking about the gestures for movement and the conducting. It made me think also, and so this is just a brainstorm on the side. Moog synthesizer.
Oh,
Now, you know how you play a Moog synthesizer? It's hand tracking. It's music hand tracking basically. So the I wonder if there's some way, like some way an expert at a Moog synthesizer could get their some sort of hand tracking interface that would be supernatural to them, and we could learn from what they do and how they move their hands to make interesting music.
funny you say that. Rotu has a music education metaverse called Jam Theory. I think you had seen a poster for it at least at PAX, and we have a theremin in there where you actually are using your hands to control sound.
Hmm.
So we're in the development phase, but ultimately we're working on that.
Excellent, excellent. One other thing I wanted to just take a second to talk about is the music theory and the lore and the sort of the cinematic universe that you've created. Talk again just about how you've brought music theory into sort of creating that whole environment and where you think that can still continue to develop and grow.
Oh man, it's if I have my way, I have a 7 series saga. The next one is going to be the next game we're looking at is most likely going to be called Lydia, which is man, hold on, let me take a step back and I'll dive into the broader points of your question before I because I get very excited about this topic. So as musicians, there is a actual written language that we all share, everything from a treble clef, like a clef of music, to the notes on sheet music, to all the little symbols that tell the musician everything from how quiet or how loud you'll play to the intensity of the timbre of a note. And there's thousands and thousands of symbols and just a lifetime worth of information to learn. And it's really sort of like locked away in the talent of musicians, right? It's not a commonly
Hmm.
understood subject
Yeah.
matter that there's a that music is almost like a lost language, the lost art that less than I think 5% of the world even speaks, if not less than that. And that was really the grounds for what we were in that saga that we created. Is we realized, oh, we have this language that a Mongolian throat singer who we worked with, right, along with uh, 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 a choir from Syria, from drummers from Brazil to who knows who, literally hundreds, over 100 countries worth of musicians and all the different instruments they play. They all share this common language, and we decided what happened if the whole world was rooted in that was our language, that was our history, and that it had a motivation to change everything we know about the world. So we started with the lands of what we call Pangea, the supercontinent, right? So our saga is based around the idea that all the continents are together, and that what are now our 7 continents are the 7 modes of music: the Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian modes. These are actual terms in music which now represent the lands. And so Ionia being which is you might have remember your music lessons as a kid, is basically C major. Any primary major scale is an Ionian mode. And so that is like the heart of the forest. Hence why we have it in a lush jungle, right? Whereas Aeolia has elements of what would be sort of barren and arid. So that is just one example of how we then tied music terminology and musical theory into every little aspect of the game. The main character of Ionia, her name is Allegra. Your name is Allegro. Those are musical terms, right? Same thing with this beast right here. The mount that you ride is called a largo, a term in music. So this is what really shaped, and now we have a much larger story that's already written that we want to take to more than just virtual reality, which has already been more than virtual reality. And we want to take it and we want to keep exploring so that eventually everyone knows about this universe and everyone understands that you can really start like for us, it's that we want to like tell the story of the real life musician in a way that has never been told before.
Well, I definitely think it has never been told this way before.
Right.
And I know we just spent quite a bit of time talking about the sort of technical innovation that you have here, but I think this is like just as innovative. And I think the fact that you bring a whole world to your technical advance makes this game really the whole package.
Right.
You know, some place where you could go. I know you talk about it's a 7-hour game, but it's some place that it's a place you could enter and become a part of. And I look forward to what's coming after and after and after.
Right.
You know,
it's the cinematic universe that now it can be an amazing platform for, I imagine, all kinds of games and other projects that can spawn out of this. And it's a really lush area of, as you said, the vocabulary, the language of music. It's a really lush area of history and vocabulary that you can pull from to sort of develop this cinematic universe. I think it's a brilliant move. It's really cool.
Thank you. And I want to give a shout out to Amir Serman. He is a co-founder of Rotu with me. He's definitely the lead brainchild on all this. It's been this wonderful collaborative effort over the past 10 years of just having us drive the idea and the story and have it grow through the interaction and collaborations with thousands of musicians over 100 countries. And what I find the best about it is that Amir has done a great job of shaping the story to fit the attitudes of the musical qualities. So, for example, Locrian mode is like this. It's the darkest, most gnarly sounding of all the modes, and that is where they're not bad, but they're industrious, and like the people that live on the Locrian continent are almost always like the bad guys because they're always trying to change and they have the most discord involved with them. And so just the fact that music has flavors and has a story in and of itself through the emotional responses it triggers in you when you hear it, we can then turn that into actual stories that are told through the characters and the environments and everything that encompasses it. So it really is truly for us like this unique story that we're going to spend our lives trying to tell.
Which is amazing. Quick aside, I can tell you're an awesome leader and a leader in the industry with each of these little shout outs that you keep putting out there, talking about your colleagues and other partners in the industry. That's just excellent and really shows a level of leadership that I really, really appreciate.
Oh, thank you.
One other area of leadership and a twist that is a little bit more behind the scenes, but another layer that I think is interesting and very definitely worth mentioning is we've got the tech, we've got the lore, we've got this awesome game, but there's the environmental aspect and the charity aspect that you guys have connected your projects to. Talk about that for a second, because I think this really, again, is another lever, another layer that is pretty interesting.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. It's very special to me. And I'm shocked that we are the only virtual reality game that has a public nonprofit partnership. So we are donating 5%, and I'll talk first about Ionia here. we're donating 5% of our proceeds to the late Steve Irwin's Wildlife Warriors Foundation. And even at the end of the game, you see Rob Irwin, Steve Irwin's son, thanking you for playing, telling you how you can help and support wildlife more. And I really have to give a shout out to that organization because they're using the majority of their proceeds to not just help endangered wildlife in Australia, but all over the world. They're helping rhinos. They're helping South American creatures. They're helping North American creatures. Anything that's endangered, they have some level of support. And I believe in the messaging of Ionia is that this forest is being cut down. The wildlife is the most important part that's trying to be saved, and it is a issue that we deal with today in a very real and severe way. So what we try and do with each game and with each story told through Ionia, Aeolia, and all the Rhythm of the Universe saga projects is tying it to something that we all share and something we all do or know together, right? That, for example, Aeolia is about climate change, something that we all deal with in whatever severity you might think it is. It is something that needs to be addressed. Ionia, same with wildlife, and the two obviously have some ties together. And future games will be about, for example, water quality, sea life, the fact that we're dramatically hurting our coastal lines and our seas. So we're always going to be tying in something that affects us all into our story, and that the story itself will help express that in a very creative way. And so Aeolia, what we're doing with Aeolia is going to actually allow our community to help vote on where the 5% of proceeds will go by listing, and this is coming up actually very soon in the next couple of weeks, by listing, let's say, 4 organizations that are the top organizations in climate change initiatives. And we're going to have our community learn about them and then vote where they would like the money for this quarter to go. And we thought that this would also help people take some time to learn about these organizations more than just to
Yeah.
let their indirect donation affect it.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Again, a whole nother layer. I said it was a little bit in the background, and it was just it, but I don't think it is as much. This is like a big pillar, and one of those things I think that people should really take notice of and sets Rotu apart. So I really love finding these studios that are bringing that whole package together. It's beautiful art, it's beautiful music, and it's a beautiful set of lore. The technology is definitely moving forward, and in fact, if you were a Canadian company, I think the Canadian government would be throwing grant money at you. They have programs that definitely this is the kind of thing that people want to see investment in, even at a governmental level. And then this idea of these environmental concepts or these challenges that we all as humans deal with, making that part of the platform of what the studio thinks about. If I was ever looking to work for a studio, finding a studio like this that does interesting things and makes you feel good about it is really the complete package. So
Thank you.
I would imagine it's got to be great for you all to go to work every day.
Exactly. It doesn't feel like work, right? It's
right.
It's helping shaping the company and the life I want to live and the life I want to see, right? I do believe very strongly personally in trying to do our best to create the things you would want to see others creating, right? And there's room for violent games, but I believe there's most certainly this growing number of people who just could care less about another shooter, like that just are absolutely so removed from it that it's not even on their radar. They don't even know what Call of Duty is, right? Where there is, especially with headset owners, this large growing group of people who would value what we're creating, and we've already shown that with the traction we have. And I look to really grow that, and I hope, to your point, Jeff, that further funding, further grants might come our way because of what we're trying to do here. But regardless, we're going to keep moving forward and creating the games we want to make.
I'm glad you brought up shooters because I feel personally pretty strongly that the industry has to get away from being 90% shooters and 90% combat if we want to embrace the bigger part of humanity, bring them into games. Because you're right, people could care less. There's so many people that could care less about shooting somebody in Halo, even if they've seen the movie, and or they think that's what all games are, which isn't that far off right now. But yeah,
as you say, huge place for that, and we'll have amazing shooters that will continue to be made,
but potentially a way bigger place than the space that's currently inhabited by shooters. Yeah.
It'll make the whole pie bigger if we can start making more of these games that pull more of these audiences in.
That's a good way of putting it.
And I think that actually ties into a broad stroke idea that is the driver of my panels, the driver of my talks, the driver of what I'm trying to do in my career is the gamification of learning, the gamification of empathy, and really driving what we've done. I mean, games are bigger than movies and television combined, right? Games are huge, and there's like laws being invented around how to make the perfect game, how to get someone addicted in the right way. And if you did that in a way that was beneficial to society, we would have a much better society. So I just feel like we could use all these things we're learning to do more than just make money. We can do it to literally make better people.
I'm excited. Now, the fact that you even just said the phrase, the gamification of empathy, now I'm super excited.
That's
I'm like, what if that's possible? Is that possible? I hope that's possible.
I see pieces of it all the time.
Wow.
So I got to write this down, and it's going to go into my bag of my list of these concepts, these big brain concepts that we learn about in having these kinds of interviews. The last episode that we did, we talked a lot about the mechanic is the message, and it was a way of using game mechanics to address and educate and teach a user, a player about a thing through the mechanic itself. The gamification of empathy.
And you would use game mechanics to do that, and it's already been done to a degree in different ways, and it's time we make it, make it at a level that's public and of a high quality.
Yeah, I mean, when you said that, I thought, well, what about the gamification of tolerance? And I thought, no, because, yes, but also that's what empathy is too. Empathy leads to tolerance. So,
like larger picture, right? Like that. Anything I really see it as anything that could benefit us, right? As a small child, as an adult, all of this could be using game mechanics to help push that. Something as simple as, well, it's not simple, but something as straightforward as even language learning, right? I mean, just especially in VR, in immersive entertainment, AR, mixed reality, VR, these are going to be drivers for this level of education. And it's just a matter of time, and it's a matter of who's making the content, right? It's
I completely agree there. In fact, I've done work in industry, in professional environments with AR and VR immersive environments for not only learning on the job, learning about, learning a situation, especially for a remote situation where you can't be in the nuclear plant during a meltdown, but you can in VR. The other place where it really got some traction, and this gets directly to the experience of empathy, were things like sensitivity training. Being able to, in a virtual reality environment, put the user in the not just the sympathetic, but the empathetic position of playing a role and seeing how the world reacts to you playing that role is very, very powerful. And there's scientific studies and papers that are being written about this as an interesting tool for doing that. So I completely agree there.
Speaking of studies, sorry to throw in one more thing, but with Jam Theory, we are actually moving forward with and paying for a research study to be done around, hey, do students learn music education better inside VR, or is it the same or worse than traditional, web-based quizzes and things like that? So we're actually right now studying, hey, does our app actually function the way we expect it to function? And I believe a lot more of this will be done, and to your point, is being done. So it's just a matter of time until we have the evidence that all of this is working.
That's interesting. I would love to. That's a great question to ask, and that's what the science is for: is to ask that question, create a hypothesis, and try to address that question. We might. I would suppose that it definitely could be a benefit. When you think about things like language learning immersive language learning, when you immerse yourself in the environment, when you take yourself and I want to learn French. Well, if I went and lived in Paris for 6 months to learn French, it's a much better experience than me, learning French, listening to an audio tape or something, once an hour here, sitting in my living room, because you're immersed in the environment. You talk about virtual reality as the immersive environment. Imagine the things that we can do and create that immersion in a learning experience, language, art, music, anything, technology, math. Let's do it. I want to wallow in maths. That seems like an amazing opportunity to me. To me, that's an amazing opportunity. Well, I don't know if everyone would have fun doing that, but let's talk. So in our last couple of minutes, let's push a little bit further into the future. I want to hear what your views are of where you think that the headsets are going to go, 5 years out. Let's start with, you've got the index behind you. What's your favorite headset right now?
Oh man, that's a good question. It depends on what for. It's a trick question because
Yep.
in terms of visual fidelity, just diving in and playing some of the highest end Steam, PC VR titles, I'd probably still go with my index. I've seen some pretty cool things from Pimax, and the HP headset's not bad either. But ultimately, I really love the controllers that Steam has created, Valve has created. The headset's not bad either in terms of the quality, visual quality. But overall, I'm still very bullish on Quest 2 and future Quest headsets until there is a competitor that I have tried and can give a similar or more value to, because I can tether my Quest 2. They use a lot of software to fix some of the lack in pixel density. They use software to allow hand tracking. They use software to really push the boundaries of what the hardware limitations are, and ultimately allowing the ability to tether. So it's just like an all-in-one amazing headset for a price that just is hard to compete with.
Right.
So I got to give it to the Quest 2.
You're right. It is a trick question. I agree. I mean, there are amazing experiences that you can get on something like a Valve Index or other high-end headsets where you're tethered and you've got a $2,000 graphics card and you've got a $1,500 headset and it looks really cool, and you use it, once a month or once every 2 months when you want to like drag all that stuff out and plug in all these cables and set up, tracking and all of that. Whereas the Quest, much cheaper. I could get a stack of these and put them in every room in my house and then just grab it and slap it on my head, and now I'm in VR.
Yep.
So
exactly.
I found when I switched to the Quest, the times that I picked up the headset and did things in VR went up by nearly an order of magnitude.
I completely agree, and it's the case for most people.
Yeah. And so you're right. That would be a stratification to say that this is one of the best headsets out there for VR gaming in general right now. I agree.
I would definitely say so. And as of right now, in terms of what Reality Labs is trying to do at Meta, we also know that they're pushing the boundaries of what we want to see for future headsets. Right, the visual Turing test, to be able to sit in a virtual doctor's office and have the same level of quality and eye testing that you could have in a doctor's office. To be able to create a much more bright headset. This is very important. To get true color, we need to be able to, in order of magnitude, grow the brightness and the quality and the contrast of what we can do inside the headset, as well as just obviously something better than the X2 chip. We just we need better graphic and better CPU, and they're all looking to create this and push the boundaries. I'm very excited to see what the true Quest 2 Pro, Quest Pro specs are. We just had the leak on the Quest 3. I think Bradley just put out a leak there, so we're looking at this new headset. What will it have? A new chip? Will it have a new graphic card? If it doesn't, are they going to do any new? They have to be pushing the boundaries. There has to be a reason why they're making it over the Quest 2. So I'm very excited to see what that is.
That's interesting. I would hope they're pushing the boundaries. They can't call it a Quest 3 without pushing those boundaries. I think it would be a miss in the marketplace, especially where we need these headsets to go. Microsoft had this issue when they went from HoloLens 1 to HoloLens 2. There was actually HoloLens 2 is actually HoloLens 3.
Yep.
They canceled HoloLens 2 because they needed more of a leap. They needed more of a step forward. Same thing with the HoloLens, the next after HoloLens 2, which would have been the 4 or whatever. They put that on hold as well, and they're working on some amazing new things. And Apple has a long roadmap on the headsets that they want to bring out to market, again, because everyone knows that it's not, this whole market does need to move forward, and there is room for lots of growth. And unless you're taking those steps and taking a leap forward, you're going to get lost in the mix of the also rans if you're just doing everything that the Quest 2 does already.
Yeah, exactly. But we can't sleep on the PlayStation VR 2. You know what I mean? There's a whole other,
right?
How many people have PS5s?
Accessibility.
How many of them,
right?
You know, mm-hmm.
Getting the devices out there is another layer of making something accessible to the market and getting penetration for the entire world to be able to have access to the technology that can take even maybe a step down in quality. But if an order of magnitude more people can get their hands on it, then maybe that's the best option for us all.
And I'm really excited about the eye tracking on the PlayStation, the PSVR 2. The fact that I can switch, obviously again, the only example we have is a shooter, but I have I have a wheel that I'm looking at, and I can make selection by just looking at something. Game changer.
That, and then you can start adding things like foveated rendering to get around lower processing capability and get a higher rendered experience, even though you don't have as high a graphics card or a next-gen graphics card. You can get next-gen graphics out of it. A lot of really interesting things can happen that way.
Space Warp might be exciting for future titles. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay. This is exciting. Again, just when I kicked this off, the first thing I said was, I love emerging tech, which this was a fun emerging tech conversation, probably more than people are used to in some of these, but that's also an area where I spend a lot of my time. An amazing studio. It was great to talk to you. I was so happy we got on, and I knew it would be great after, how many times did I stop by the booth at PAX West?
Oh man,
I was like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
I stayed an extra day, and I still came back, and I loved getting my hands on it. And playing it, and I've been playing it here. So can't wait to see what's next. I can't wait to see the next world that comes out and see the next projects that get announced. Thank you very much. This has been great.
Oh, awesome.
It's great talking to you. Thank you for coming.
And if you don't mind, real quick, I want to make my cat famous.
Yes. We love that.
This is Sebastian.
Of course, Sebastian.
Here's Sebastian Bach.
Aww.
Sebastian Bach, yes.
I love this guy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye now.
This has been a New Overlords production. For more, please visit newoverlords.com for video, subscribe and feed links, and other ways to help the show.